the bookshop, it's the bookshop, it's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. It's Sam Feifel, your host of John Updike's Ghost, the podcast that delivers all your favorite awesomeness about books, bookstores, literature, various travels around the world, and, I don't know, medical advice, I think, or something. Anyway,
at least this time.
I am here, as always, with the co-owner of the bookshop of Beverly Farms and all-around awesome person, Hannah Harlow. How are you doing today, Hannah?
Thanks. Great to be here on my birthday.
It is your birthday. I was going to tell people that it was your birthday. You sort of
I thought maybe you forgot. Sorry.
A little bit. No. As everybody knows, we are recording on March 4th, and Hannah was born on the only day of the year that is a declarative sentence. March 4th, one and all.
Go March 4th, all ye readers.
And it is Hannah's birthday, so she is in a great mood for this podcast. It is going to be top drawer. And as you'll recall, last time we have instituted a new policy whereby we are going to announce which books we are talking about on this very pod at the very beginning so that people know what is coming. This is a podcaster trick that I have learned, and it resulted in us going from 31 to 36 views on our last podcast. So clearly it is working. So the books that I have for us, I have a very brief sum up of Prophet Song now that I have finished it, as people remember from last time, by Paul Lynch. I have this book that you were hiding from me, apparently, by Philip Pullman, The Good Man, Jesus, and the Scoundrel Christ, which I stole from your house when I was there and did not tell you about.
Did not mean to hide it from you. It's been there for years.
Well, you didn't tell me about it. That's great. And I also have this wonderful book that you got for me, Jonathan Lethem, The Collapsing Frontier Plus. It's a little short story by him, which is actually not very good, but the essays in the book are awesome, and I'm very glad to have read them. And then finally, I am going to talk briefly about Stephen King's Polly. What about you?
I am going to talk about Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg. Rare nonfiction read for me. Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden, which is historical fiction with a speculative twist.
Creepy. Yep.
And Women and Children First by Susan Wilson, because we are hosting an event with that author this Sunday at the Hastings House. It's the first in our Literary Salon series.
It is the first in our Literary Salon series. And of course, we're going to talk about it at the Literary Salon series. But I'm imagining, since you are going to be interviewing the author of this book, that you've probably read a little bit about it. Why don't you tell people just a little bit about this book that we are going to be using as the start of our Salon series?
I have read a good portion of it. I usually save reading. When I'm going to interview an author, I read at the last minute because my memory is somewhat faulty and I want everything to be fresh in my mind.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way to do it.
Right. But it is a great biography of Dr. Susan Dimock, who was born in North Carolina and kind of came of age during the Civil War. So her town was occupied by Union troops. Then there were big fires that burned half the town, including her family's hotel, which forced her and her mother to flee to Massachusetts, where they had family. From an early age, she showed an interest in medicine and practicing medicine, which, of course, at that time was, not really an acceptable thing for women to do. But she persevered. She had mentors. And
I think there's a playing doctor joke there that I'm not going to make.
Don't make that. Yeah, that's. And so she was a pioneering surgeon in Boston. The surprising thing I just learned is she died at a very young age.
I thought she lived to a ripe old age because she did all this stuff.
No, she died when she was 28.
What? And she founded the Boston Children's Hospital?
Yes. So, just imagine if she had had a nice long life. So it's kind of a tragic story.
I did not know that. You kind of brought me
Yeah.
down. I was expecting like she was like, in her dotage in like 1970 or something.
I'm afraid not, but I think it's remarkable what she achieved in those few years. And I'm excited to talk to Susan Wilson, who did, a ton of research, worked on this for like 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer, before it was published. So I'm sure she has a lot of really interesting tidbits, and curious to see, what she dug up and how she dug up. Like, because there weren't, I don't think there was a lot left behind. So I think she had to really dig.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that trying to find out information about people from the past is very difficult nowadays.
Yes.
I think it was always difficult, but one, Google has decided it doesn't want to be good at looking for things anymore. And so it doesn't index anything anymore for reasons that are really hard to understand. And you actually, you can find, it's weird. There's like a black hole from about 1960 to about 2010. Like they've archived all this, I can find the freaking town report of Industry Maine in 1903, but I can't find the town report for Industry Maine in 1983. I cannot figure out why that's the case, but it is the case for whatever reason.
Well, I think so. Maybe because Dr. Dimock's life was so short, it is a brisk 200-page biography with lots of interesting asides about things that were happening, at that time.
That is what I've found when you don't really know much about the person. You have to fill it. Oh, and actually in 1903, you'll find that this thing was happening, which is super interesting because you got to flesh it out a little bit. Well, that's good. That's this Sunday. So people who are listening right when this pod drops, which is all of you, on Thursday is Sunday, March 10th is when the day.
2 p.m.
If you are listening after Sunday, March 10th at 2 p.m., too bad for you. So sorry. It's at the Hastings House, which is a lovely place, and we're very excited about that. I don't have any nonfiction to read. The closest thing I have, I guess, is there's some sort of nonfiction-ness about it, is this Jonathan Lethem book, which I'll start with, which Hannah got for me at the Winter Institute. It was a wonderful surprise. I came down to the bookshop to do my 2 days of hard labor last week while Hannah was in California. And what do I find but this wonderful little slim book? It is the PM Press's Outspoken Authors series. I don't know what PM Press is, but Hannah probably does.
Small press. I wasn't super familiar with them either, but they are distributed by the Ingram Content Group.
Oh. Well, they put out books that are like, basically it's one short story and then an interview with the author of the short story and then a collection of their essays. And they are labeled as Outspoken Authors. And you'll probably recognize a lot of them. Kim Stanley Robinson and Ursula Le Guin is in this, Cory Doctorow.
So sort of like speculative authors there.
Yeah, I think, part of it seems like Samuel Delany. That's incredible. How did they interview Samuel Delany? Isn't he dead? But maybe that was a while ago. I don't know, because this is the 30th one, The Collapsing Frontiers, and there's a 31 and a 32 with John Kessel and Kara Hoffman, two people I've never heard of. I don't know. It's a cool little package. It's also signed in a way that is illegible. It says for Sam and something, which we can't understand. I don't know. And it's like LERT.
I was there. I was talking to him while he signed it, but I don't remember what it might be.
Well, people might remember we had Jonathan Lethem's The Arrest as one of our book club books back in the day. He is a Mainer via Brooklyn. I think he spends most of his time in down east Maine now, from what I can tell from the essays. And he is a powerfully good writer. Like, he's the type of writer that makes me just really excited about writing. Like, every time I'm reading, I'm like, oh my God, I don't need to read all these other things. He seems like he's kind of like a dying breed. He's very Updikean, very Paul Austerian in that, he is this voluminous reader of everybody else. And when he does, when he's asked to do these introductions, so for instance, like he does a review of Edward Snowden's permanent record. And so that's included in this, right? And his review is like just filled with references to H.P. Lovecraft and to, I just like I can't even, get started because it's just so many. And so he just like effortlessly brings in like, well, when so-and-so introduced this book back in 1967, blah, 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 blah. And it just gets you like diving down into, oh, I need to read that. Oh, I need to read that.
Holes. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of when we had Andre Dubus for that event. Right. It's just like everything is like, there are references to so many other authors and like he's just quoting people and you're like, how are you
well, I think part of it is they're both not just creative writing teachers, but they are both creative writing teachers to like undergrads. So that's one of the things that Lethem talks about in like the interview of him is really bad. I don't know who the interviewer is. I don't it's like, it's one of those interviews that's just like asking ridiculous questions. And actually, I think the
like what? Give me an example.
Terry Bisson is the interviewer who is, I think he just died. I looked him up. He was like a sci-fi author. So this book must have been put together a while ago. He died in like 2021. I just looked him up. But, so he starts off with, what was it like to get the MacArthur Genius Award? What did it do for you? And Lethem's like, I'm tired of talking about this, But then, like later, is plot for you a mentor, a taskmaster, or a companion? And Lethem is like, like, there's a couple different ones where you can tell he's like, does your car have a pet name? I hope not. And, Lethem's like, actually, I do have a car story, so I'll tell it,
Yeah. Yikes.
What's the deal with the jukebox on your website? Are you trying to hitch a ride on rock? And Lethem's like, well, actually, I did this project where, like, I worked with these guys, and that's the music from it.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that sounds awkward. But does, raise for me a good question of, like, what, do you think makes a good interview? What are good interview questions? As I am writing my interview questions for Susan Wilson this weekend. We interview people a lot.
Yeah, well, a good interview is supposed to be a conversation, right? Like the interviewer has to also be a listener, right?
Right.
If the interview reads like just a series of questions that you wrote down on your notepad before the interview started, it's a shitty interview. I'm sorry. Like, nobody talks like that, right? So you should have some topics that you want to get to. There's nothing wrong with, well, actually, I did want to ask you about blah, 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 because there's some natural transition, right? But like, you have to be willing to abandon your whole list of questions to pursue this super interesting thing, right? Like, there's like 5 or 6 times where Lethem references something, and I'm like, oh, I would like to know more about that. And it's like, oh, what about the jukebox? And it's like, dude, like, you have to follow up on that. Like,
I think that's why I find it so stressful when I'm prepping for an interview, because I know this, right? Like, I'm like, okay, I have to know the work super well so that I can like reference it and refer back to it when she brings whoever I'm interviewing brings something up. But I need to have kind of these questions written out in case I panic and like need to go to the paper and go to the questions. And often I don't. Right. Often it just flows and it's great. But
I mean, sometimes you run across these interview subjects who really don't have that much to say. Right. Like,
yes, correct.
They like go pop, 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 pop. And you're like, it's your turn to talk still. But you're
they don't say enough.
And
totally.
So then,
I've definitely experienced that.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like having a couple of like, pull ripcord questions. But like, even then, a good interview, like, you have to, when they only say like, bah, 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 you have to sit there for like at least like 15 or 20 seconds and like see if there's more, because often there's more.
Yes.
And they just, won't say more unless you make it uncomfortable. And then they're like, oh, well, actually this thing did happen. Right. So you have to do that.
And it's hard to do that because those 15 seconds feel so long, even though for the audience, like it's probably like not that weird.
No, but you have to do it. And then you also have to be willing to say, I'm sure you have more to say about than that. That's really weird. Or like something, like you have to
shake them into saying more.
Like, I didn't ask you a yes or no question. Like, keep talking. It's your job. We're here.
Right.
You know, like
We're here from you, not from me.
Exactly. Yeah. But you do also have to be, that's the other thing, is that you have to be part of the conversation. You have to say, and this guy does do it like a couple times where, you know, he's like, one of the questions is like, have you ever been in the Hudson River in a canoe? I have. It's like, that's actually not a good question. But you are, you know, you do have to keep up your end of the conversation and be able to like extrapolate on some topic for a little bit and then say something like, has that been your experience as well? Or do you find it different? Or what's your experience with that or whatever, you know? And
you know, this is into my next book, unless you have more to say about.
Well, the only thing I wanted to say is that like the best essay in here is, Lethem has, I don't even know, it doesn't say that it might be for this collection. I'm not sure. It doesn't say where it showed up first, I don't think. I'm looking right now. But it's a like essay on the 100th birthday of Stanislav Lem. Lem, you know, the science fiction author.
I do know him.
It is like the best literary essay on a guy's work I've ever read. That's like, I mean, maybe it's 3,000 words. Like it's
awesome.
It's just so incredibly concise, and it had, like what Lethem does amazingly well. And I think why he's so popular is he can shift from like, I'm John Updike and I know everything about every literary thing that's ever happened into like these really hyper personal stories about he and his grandmother going to a sci-fi convention and him falling in love with the covers of these books, like just effortlessly. And it's both a personal essay and the definitive text on this guy's work at the same time. And it's just like, this whole book is worth it. Just, I read that essay. I was like, holy fuck, I can never write that good in my life. Like, it's so good.
Right. So Lem is the author of Solaris, among many other kind of classic sci-fi.
Ridiculously prolific. Lethem makes this cool argument that he is actually 5 writers. Like,
oh, wow.
He's like, he's this writer, this writer, this writer, this writer. It's like,
so, you know, I met Jonathan Lethem for the first time because back in my old job, Houghton Mifflin was publishing Philip K. Dick's The Exegesis, which was like this massive
He's a huge Dick fan,
yeah. And so he had written the introduction to that. And I went to his house in Maine and interviewed him to make a video. I didn't interview him. I set up making a video to support that book. But like that book of Philip K. Dick's was like ridiculous. I'm sure like 5 people have read it, you know.
I own it and I have not read it. No.
Yeah.
I've read pieces of it.
Right. But like Lethem, I think read, you know.
Oh, I think he crushed it. I think
yeah.
I think he's one of these dudes that like doesn't participate in the internet and like just does nothing but like read and write all day.
Yeah. Anyway, that's super interesting. That book just came out. We have it in the shop.
Oh, this Lethem book?
Yeah, it's new.
People should buy it because it's awesome.
Cool. So I was going to talk about Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg next.
There you go.
Because that book, when we were talking about how to, you know, participate in a good interview, that it reminded me of that book because it's about how to be a better communicator, just kind of in all aspects of your life. And the key to it is really listening to figure out what kind of conversation you're having.
It's always listening. Yes.
It's always listening. And also the other key is like asking lots of questions. And I think there are, like reading the book, I kept thinking like there are people in my life who seem to naturally be these kind of super communicators who just naturally understand what kind of conversation you're having. They ask the right questions. They kind of keep you talking. They make you feel heard. So this book tries to teach you how to be more like that if you're not naturally a super communicator or
You're
whatever.
such a positive person, because the flip side of that is I know there are people in my life who never ask me any questions and seem completely and totally disinterested in my interior life. And you're having this conversation with them and you're like, holy smokes, man.
Right.
I might not even be here.
Right.
You're just talking at me. Stop talking.
You walk away from that just so angry. You're like,
it's mostly like I describe it as energy. Like I feel people's energy really physically. We were actually talking about this. I know this guy does not listen to our podcast, so I'm not going to feel bad about it. He's like he's like the lead ski instructor guy at the mountain, right? And he's like, so he never teaches a lesson. He just teaches the instructors how to teach. So he'll often be like, observing you, and heaven forbid he ever tell you when that's going to happen and whatever. Right. And this guy is just, there's nothing wrong with him, right? Like, he's not a bad dude. Like, I don't think he kicks puppies or anything, but he is just a dementor. He gets on the chairlift with you. And like, I feel this physical depression, like weight falling on my head when he never listens to anything you said. He just tells stories about the stupidest crap you can possibly imagine. He tells you about what a bad skier you are. And everybody hates the dude. And like, I think he thinks, like, I think he's just like baffled by why no one wants to ride the lift with him. Like, he does this thing where like three of us will be about to get on the quad, and he'll just like zoom in and like take that fourth seat and be like, well, hey guys. And you're like, oh no. And you have to sit there like for 10 minutes, like with this asshole sitting next to you. And it's brutal. You got to make conversation. And so yesterday I was like next to him, and the other two people were on the other side of us. And those two people just immediately turned to each other and start talking and like abandoned me into this.
But it's so sad. But also, maybe you should give him a copy of this book.
I think he needs it badly because he has no clue. Zero.
It's really sad because when I taught skiing at the Middlebury Snow Bowl in my college days, there was a guy named Dwight who was the equivalent of this guy.
Yeah.
And I freaking love this guy still. Like, I haven't seen him in 30 years. And I'm like, but Dwight was the best because he was just like so kind. And he was the exact opposite. Like, he'd be like, he seemed genuinely invested in like how to make you a better instructor.
Right.
In the kindest way.
That's the thing is like, people like are always complaining about him, like telling you what a bad skier you are. I actually am fine with instruction. Like, one of the coolest things about being a ski instructor is I'll be riding up with other instructors and I'll be like, I really can't get on the outside edge of my left ski. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And someone will be like, oh, have you tried putting your knee a little bit forward in the turn? And I'll try that out. Like, I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
like, I love talking about ski technique, but just the way this guy does it, it's like, oh, see, you're back. You're on your back foot. I'm like, I didn't know this was a test. Like, I'm just fucking around, man.
Right. So, okay. So going back to the book.
Yes.
Right. Like I think, so we saw this author, Charles Duhigg, speak at the New England Bookseller Association trade show back in the fall.
All right. Yeah, I wondered why you brought in like a 6-pack of these. I was wondering why you thought this was going to be so successful.
Well, he wrote a book years ago called The Power of Habit. I think is the title. And that was a big bestseller. So, I think of him as a big name in the kind of self-help, like business reader community.
Mm-hmm.
And this book, it did make the indie bestseller list after the first week on sale. I don't know that we've sold a copy yet.
I saw there was a big pile on the desk,
but other stores across the country seem to be selling it well. And now that I've read most of it anyway, I feel better equipped to recommend it to people because I do find it genuinely interesting and helpful.
Well, I interrupted you though. You were saying that they reminded you of...
that when as I was saying, part of it is just recognizing the type of conversation you're having and then trying to match conversation. So I've had the experience, right? Like back in the day when I hated my job and I would come home at night and I'd just be like bitching about stuff at work.
Mm-hmm.
And my wonderful husband would be trying to like problem solve.
No.
I was not having a problem solving conversation. I was just having like a bitch session. I just wanted him to be like, yes, that sucks. You're so right. Like whatever. And I think that's a very common experience of like he identifies the 3 types of conversations as practical, emotional, or social. Mm-hmm. So like he was having a practical conversation and I was having an emotional conversation.
Exactly. Doesn't fit. That line. Right. I think your husband, Jason, has learned that lesson by now.
He has. Yeah. He has gotten, he now recognizes when we are having emotional conversations.
Yeah. That sort of made it in. What I think is really funny is when like these little tips like somehow make it into like mainstream conversation and like, it's like a plot point in a show or whatever. And then like, everybody's like, oh, I was doing that dickish thing. And now I won't anymore. And it like sweeps across. Like, it's like, whoa, dude, you should know that by now.
Yes.
So you would recommend this book to people who would like to be better communicators. What if you feel as though you're a good communicator? Is there still something to learn?
Yeah. I mean, because I think we can always be better at something. And maybe you're a good communicator like at home, but you want to be better at work or vice versa. Or like, I think there's always going to be someone in your life that maybe you struggle to connect with or whatever.
I've had to have a lot of practice. The one thing about being a small town politician is that you find yourself communicating with like lots of people that you otherwise would not have communicated with.
Totally.
And the biggest communication tactic that I've taken on in the last like 4 or 5 years, especially during the pandemic, is I am not going to get in a fight with you. No matter how badly you want this fight, we're not going to have a fight. We're on the same side always. And it's amazing how quickly that diffuses people who want to have a fight. Mostly they're like, that's an emotion. It's funny. It is sometimes nice to have like a nomenclature. They just want to have an emotional conversation and tell me what a fucking dumbass I am. And I'm like, you know what? I am a dumbass.
Yeah.
And then it just all goes away.
Yeah. I am matching you. I'm agreeing with you and matching the conversation you're having. And now we're having a great conversation.
It all just diffuses. And then it's like, okay, figure out how to solve my dumbassness. And they're like, okay, let's do it. And it works out great.
I mean, I think about it as I was reading the book, I was thinking about it mostly in the store, because that's where I'm having like tons of conversations with tons of different people from all walks of life and with different needs. And, some people come in and, they're like, I need help because I'm buying this gift for this person. Or sometimes they're like, I'm just browsing. I don't want to talk to you. Right. And I'm just like, we don't have to talk.
Okay, too. But then that's when I always employ what have you been enjoying lately? And then boom, all of a sudden they're talking to me and we're not having it because they're not worried that I'm trying to sell them something. I'm getting information. They're the expert.
And it's learning questions like that. Like, what types of questions are we asking? Like, okay, you're on a schedule and you want to get this gift. So let me ask, like, who's it for? What do they like to read? Like, let me ask all the practical questions of like, do you want a hardcover or paperback? Do you have like a, price limit? Like, and if it's like what you said, then we're asking like, let's just chat. Let's just chat.
Yeah, I learned much of that from my mentor at the hammock store, Beto.
Oh, sure.
Back in Boulder. Yeah. He taught me how to sell. I've never sold anything in my life, really, but when I want to sell, I always think about Beto. He also told me, and this is the way you know that he was not right about everything. He used to have this big, giant key ring with like 1 million keys on it. And he used to always say, you can tell how important a person is by the number of keys they have. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting, Beto. And now, to this day, I do not have a single key, not one.
You have a key to the bookstore somewhere.
I do have a key to the bookstore, but, I'm always confident that I'll be able to get in even if I forget it. That was a long time, actually, when I had 0 keys. All right, so let's talk about a more serious book. I'm going to transfer it. So I was staying at your house while I worked my hard labor at the bookstore. And you have this beautiful bookshelf that surrounds your TV. So while I was watching The Magicians for the 3rd time on your TV, after I figured out how to stream to your Google whatever stupid thing, which took way longer than it should have, I saw on your shelf next to all the Philip Pullman, there's a Philip Pullman book I've never heard of called The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ. And I
haven't actually read it, to be honest.
I needed to read it.
My husband read it, and I'm
Jay read it?
This was years ago now. But I love Philip Pullman. So when that book came out, like 15 years ago, whatever it was, I was like, we have to have this. And then Jason read it, and then I just never read it. So tell me, should I?
It's amazing. It's a little allegory. It's a very short book. Like it's even, it's a small format book, and even still there's like a ton of chapters, and the font is large or whatever.
I love that. I love that type of book.
Yeah, it's a super easy read. I read it in like maybe 2 days. But it's part of some series. I've I read it at the end, the Myth series, right? So this publisher, it's Grove Atlantic, Canongate, I think, is the like imprint of Grove Atlantic. And so they did this Myth series where they brought like, you know, famous authors like Margaret Atwood, A.S. Byatt, David Grossman, you know, Alexander McCall Smith. And they asked them to like write or retell a myth.
Oh, sure.
And Philip Pullman, being a badass, rewrites the myth of the birth of Jesus Christ, which is just like so awesome. Like it's so, you know,
Who would want to take that on?
like it's crazy, right? It's so provocative. But then the thing is he is so smart and thoughtful that like, I don't know how, you know, even if you are like a hardcore Christian, which I think he is ultimately.
I think he is too.
Right?
I mean, there's a lot of Christian allegory and
and like even though
materials.
it usually calls into what it calls into question, and what this book calls into question amazingly is the framework of how Christianity has been implemented in society, while just, you know, centering in on the core message of Christianity, which is, you know, beautiful. Like, you know, it's hard to argue with love your neighbor as you love yourself, you know, like, you know, the actions of Jesus Christ of the Christian Bible are like unassailable, you know, feed the poor, take care of the sick, you know, draw attention to the ills of the world. And so what Pullman does is break it apart and create these two brothers who are Jesus and Christ, two different names. They're born, you know, to Mary as twins. One is like, you know, kind of sickly, and that's Christ, and one is super healthy, and that's Jesus. And follows them through all of the activities of Jesus Christ and getting disciples and all this sort of stuff, as though they were two people, and uses it to kind of like explain some of the miracles, right? Like,
cool.
Especially the resurrection, right? So Jesus dies, and Christ is the one that's still alive and takes on this like mantle of Jesus. But he has been corrupted by all of these people who are like, oh, we're going to build this like church on earth. And that's where, you know, all of Jesus's teachings will happen, because we know that the second coming isn't going to happen for a really long time. And, you know, and it just shows the insidious way that people who are desperate for power can lever any good thing, you know? And so Jesus is out there like doing miracles, gathering followers, and Christ and these, you know, charlatans, you know, are ready to like swoop in with this infrastructure that will allow them to, you know, make $1 billion or whatever it is that the church's mission is.
Wow. That's awesome.
The language and, you know, the way that he engages in myth making is so good. You know, I mean, he's obviously great at it in general, but like, it's just effortlessly readable. And you're sitting there, you're like, oh yeah, this is the story of the money changers. And oh yeah, this is the story of, you know, this, that, and the other thing that you know so well because you've been brought up in Western culture. And like, he just plays with it brilliantly. So,
that's awesome.
You know, I think it's probably heresy, and there are people who will you know, clutch their skirts or whatever. But it's just, I mean, it's just like a really important book. And I can't believe they're like, he's like, oh yeah, I'll just throw that out as part of this myth series, you know, like one of my books. It's just so impressive. I love it. I love it.
I think Canongate is a British publisher. I don't know if they have a US, and so maybe Grove did the US publication.
Maybe it said it.
Are those a lot of British authors you named? I feel like.
Well, no, it says it was published simultaneously in Canada, but printed in the United States of America. First published in Great Britain in 2010 by Canongate, which is based in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Oh,
so they must have had some deal in Canada. Yeah. So I don't know, because
the Commonwealth countries, you know.
Yeah, it is very un-American, I guess.
Yeah. Well, my last book is the Catherine Arden book, The Warm Hands of Ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
Which, do you recall, I believe that you loved her, The Bear and the Nightingale?
She's the one who did the Russian trilogy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those 3 books are like the best books I've ever read. They're amazing. I love them. Like I remember I was like hunting them down, trying to find the last one.
Oh, because I gave you the first two for your birthday, I think, and the third
think
one wasn't in
so.
the store when
And
I
then I
bought
couldn't
them.
find the other one.
Right. So when I saw that,
good. Like, talk about myth making and stuff. Oh my God, she's amazing.
yeah, so she has a new book out, and it is World War One, historical fiction, and the main character is a woman named Laura and her brother Freddie. So you go back and forth between Laura and Freddie's experiences, and they are Canadian. They're from Halifax. And so Laura was a nurse in the war, and she got injured and discharged, and so she goes back home to Halifax. And then there's the big explosion in the harbor that
Oh yeah. That's like a big part of like Portland history. Like Portland helped the people of Halifax. Is she like local New England? What is she?
I actually don't know. I didn't look that up. But the book opens with this like Halifax tragedy, which I did find super because Boston sent a lot of supplies too. So I feel like, we both have this in our Maine and Massachusetts histories of like whatever.
It was a big deal.
So the book opens and Laura has lost her parents in that tragedy. She's all damaged from the war, and her brother Freddie is missing, presumed dead in, overseas in Belgium. So she wants to find out what happens to her brother. So she finds a way to get back to the front lines by joining a private hospital that this woman is putting together. And there's a speculative twist, which doesn't come out for like the first third of the book. It just seems really straightforward. And so I knew that she has, it's when it came in, it like automatically went into our fantasy category. Like it was already categorized that way. So I kept thinking, like, do I have this in the wrong category? Like, should it just be in regular fiction? Because I don't where's the fantasy element here?
Right.
So I've just reached it, and there is kind of a magical hotel on the front lines where there's the man who runs it, has these magical abilities and serves magical wine. So it takes you away from like where you are. So more on that next time, but so far so good. She is a terrific writer. I will say it's pretty dark. Like it's, she pulls no punches on like how shitty war is.
Yeah, her stuff is dark. So the three books that I read for people who are listening, it's The Bear and the Nightingale, The Girl in the Tower, and The Winter of the Witch. And it's this 3-book series that basically dives into the Russian Baba Yaga mythology and the founding of Moscow, and basically how Russia came to like be an empire way, way back when. And so it's got all of the dudes with deer pulling their sleds and, furs and dealing with the elements and, baby czars and all kinds of stuff like that. And then there's just the element of the Baba Yaga that comes in, and it's just super trippy. I'm kind of a sucker for all the Russian mythology stuff in general, but like really well executed. And I think that stuff was maybe in YA. No, I guess not. It's just magical realism, fantasy.
She does have some YA books, I believe. There's like a horror-ish, light horror. I mean, it's middle grade
the
series.
Small Spaces.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't even seen that.
That is middle grade, actually, not YA.
Yeah. And I think actually the first one, Bear and the Nightingale, sort of stands alone too. If you don't want to,
cool.
You don't have to read all three. But I'm trying to find the third one. I was like, I need to have this book. I would look for it in every bookstore I was in. It's kind of a good segue to my last book, which is the Stephen King book, Holly. Kristen, my wife, has had dalliances with Stephen King. Like, she likes Stephen King. Maybe she doesn't like Stephen King. This is the new one. I got it for her for Christmas, I think. Maybe
I don't remember.
Maybe her birthday. And regardless, she was like, oh, I did want this. And but she has not read it yet. And so she said to me this week, you should read the new Stephen King you got me so you can tell me whether it is too scary for me.
And what
So
is the
I'm reading
prognosis?
it. I'm like 100 pages into it, and it's like so Stephen King. Like he has become this like sanctimonious caricature of himself, like that's just like beloved by like the liberal people on Twitter or whatever, like dunking on Trump. Look at him, Stephen King dunking on Trump. And this whole book is just dunking on Trump, I guess. Like,
Oh,
I remember
I
when it
didn't see
came
that
out,
coming.
people were like, "Oh my god, it's so topical! It's like right on the button," and it's like, it's there's a number of little timelines. It skips around, which I feel is like a super lazy way to write, but it's like 2021 in like the main timeline, and they're like dealing with COVID, and the main character just go, "Oh, I didn't wear my mask in that interaction. Does that make me a bad person?" And like there's like constant talk about how her mother died because she was a Trumpist and didn't want to get vaccinated, and it's like, it's everything that Stephen King has become. Like everything is binary. You're either a good guy or a bad guy. And, the bad guys are totally and ridiculously evil. And the good guys are, flawed humans. And
I feel like it got good reviews in the liberal newspapers.
I'm sorry, fairy tale. If you've read any fantasy ever, fairy tale is so derivative, boring, and stupid. Like it should be illegal what he did. He was like,
God.
I'm going to write an interesting little neighborhood story. And then because I want to write fantasy and it's COVID, I'm going to write this fantasy story that rips off every other fantasy story ever, is poorly executed and super boring and has zero payoff. And everybody's going to be like, oh my God. And it's the same thing with Holly. It's like, if you think this is interesting social commentary, it's like, I don't know. This is like social commentary for 3-year-olds. Like it's so like,
yeah.
just
I mean, I just, in Stephen King's defense and in like a lot of other authors' defenses, like, I took down The Fury or whatever by Alex Michaelides recently.
Right. Yeah.
I just think the publishing machine these days is so demanding on authors of like, you need to churn out these books year after year, or you're going to become obsolete. No one's going to pay attention. No one's going to remember who you are. We're not going to give you the time to write and think anymore. We just need you to produce. Like, is maybe damaging some of these authors' outputs.
It could very well be. I mean, Stephen King, like whatever, he writes pulp. I'm fine. Like the thing is, none of the social commentary is necessary to the plot, right? Like, the mom could have died of cancer, to give this woman some, emotional baggage to start with, like the bad guys, like it just feels so sanctimonious. Like I'm being preached to. And I'm like, I'm on your side, bro. Like I want everybody to get vaccinated too. I'm no big Trump fan. Like Trump's a dick, but like the emotional energy you put into telling everybody that Trump is a dick, I don't know.
Right.
It just feels like I'm writing a book for a certain subset of people. Like write a book for everybody.
I don't know about that.
No.
Write a book for everybody.
You think you should? Oh, that's a very interesting question. Defend the idea that I'm writing a book only for a certain subset of people. Why would I want to do that?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I just think as a former marketer, when authors would write their questionnaires out, right? There was a standard set of questions that every author published by our company got. I think it's pretty standard practice across publishers.
I don't know if I've heard about this standard questionnaire for authors.
I mean, it's like, the basics, like give us your address and all, whatever.
I thought you'd know where the address was, but I don't know.
But you also you need a starting point, right? Like what do you think your book is about? Who do you think your book is for? Right. And also who are who are your media contacts? Who are your other author contacts? Sure. Who do when do you think is a good time to publish this book to tie into like a holiday or whatever? Just tell us what you think so that we can, try not to piss you off too much. And also give us a starting point for starting to write your flap copy. And also how am I going to start thinking about marketing? Just knowing we maybe aren't going to read your whole book. Just
almost definitely not.
Putting it out there.
Marketing team can't read every book.
We can't read every single book.
No, definitely not. Especially this.
So, are there audiences that you could help us identify so that we can market your book to them? And people who are just like, "Oh, my book's for everybody." I'm like, that's not helpful. And you know what? Your book's not for everybody.
From a marketing perspective, there are certain people that are more likely to, fans of fantasy are going to like this, right?
Yes.
Like there are certain people but like, I think the best fantasy writers write books that people who don't like fantasy will still like, right? Like,
yeah.
People can say, oh, I don't like when there's ghosts or I don't like when it's science fiction, right? But like, there are, Emily St. John Mandel can do science fiction, and people who have never liked science fiction are like, oh, this is awesome, right? Because she has bridged that divide. It's just like when Beyonce puts out a country album, all of a sudden a whole bunch of people like country music who told themselves they don't like country music. And I feel like that's
also, there are going to be some country artists who are just like, no, this is super country. And if you don't like country, you're not going to like it. And that's okay.
That's fine. Yes. That's fine. But
I think that's what I mean, right? There are going to be super nerdy sci-fi authors who are just like, this is so sci-fi. And I'm going to be like, that's not like, I'm not super into that.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're probably bad writers. If you're writing a book that like, you're like, oh, this is only for sci-fi fans and people who don't like sci-fi aren't going to like it, I think you're probably not good at executing what you're trying to do. Who are you, what are you trying to do? Just write a cheap sci-fi novel that, kills 2 hours of somebody's time.
This is interesting to think about. You're right.
I'm grossed out by that idea. But I think about it too. Like I think about it a lot. Like people want to call us like a bluegrass band or whatever, Right. I'm like, yes, I play bluegrass, but like I'm making music that I think everybody can enjoy. Right. And like, I can't imagine the idea that somebody be like, if you don't like bluegrass, you should not come. Like, that's part of my jokes.
Probably saying the same thing that like, we used to talk about doing like regional to national campaigns, which is a metaphor for like start with your core fans, right? Like start with the people who are like the easy gets, like you're going after bluegrass fans, or like I'm going to market this to fantasy readers. And then when they love it, they're going to tell their friends about it. And like you have to rely on some like word of mouth to get the wider audience or whatever.
Yeah, like I don't think there's anything wrong with working. Like I think working in a genre in general, right? Like and I've talked about this before, but one of the coolest things about working in a genre is that there are decisions you don't have to make, right? Like I'm not going to think about what my instrumentation is going to be. I'm not going to think about like what my song structure is going to be. I'm going to write a song that is in this format. But then that allows me to be creative with so many other things because I don't have to think about those things, right? So like when you're writing detective fiction, you're like, okay, I'm going to write detective fiction. I know what that's about. I know a bunch of pieces of this framework of story, but now I can focus in on this little cool piece of humanity that I want to explore in this framework. And I don't have to make up all the rest of the universe. And I don't have to, I can just focus on this little thing I want to explore.
Right. You're working within a formula, which allows you to... And I think
that's what King could have done here, actually. But he just takes a mallet to our heads. I'm just...
On that note...
He can finish the book, whatever. It's not like he forgot how to write compelling prose. Although I do think it's weird. He gives away his bad guys in the first 10 pages. I don't understand what he's doing. I'm assuming there's some twists that I don't know.
All right. Well, we both have books to finish and report back on next time to see how they end.
We do. Also, we would be remiss if we didn't tell people about this event we're having with Amy Alley Card.
A local author.
She's from
Wenham, I believe. Hamilton, Wenham, same thing. Sorry, guys.
Ooh,
no, I'm just kidding. She's from Wenham.
And she wrote a book called The Tiger Bells, and we're going to be talking with her in the bookshop on Thursday, March 21st at 6 o'clock. Hannah's going to be in conversation with her, and it is the story of the 1960 Tennessee State track team who, en masse, just went to the Olympics and won all the gold medals. And super interesting story. I don't know yet why this woman from Wenham decided to tell this story, but that's what we're going to learn about.
We are going to find out.
Thursday the 21st.
And we are leaning in hard to Women's History Month. I'm super pumped to bring all these women's stories to light. And it's great.
Yeah, you're really selling it there.
I thought I was, but okay.
We are excited to tell these women's stories.
Women's history
Say it
is
with your
for
chest.
everybody.
There we go. There we go. We are not going to be mincing about those words. We are going to say it loud and proud. On that note, you should come. And we have a bunch of other events in the works. I know we have the Salon series. We still have one of those to book, probably. And but people are reaching out to us all the time. I met this woman when I was in the bookshop. Is it Leslie? What's the Splinter book that just came out?
Oh, Jameson.
Leslie Jameson. A woman came in who is a poetry professor at Endicott, who says that she was Leslie's teacher at Harvard.
No way.
And I said to her, wow, we would really love to do poetry events here at the bookshop. You and your students should come here and do some poetry stuff. And she said,
I thought you were going to say,
I'm going to do that.
Can you bring us Leslie Jameson?
Oh, we could probably do that.
That too.
I don't know. Is she? I had never heard of Leslie Jameson before all this buzz about the Splinters came out, and it's like
he's
a memoir.
kind of big time.
I know, but I didn't. Why she wrote a memoir? I don't know who she is. So.
She's an essayist, I would say.
Yeah, I think we've established it's not my cup of tea in general.
Right.
But anywho, hopefully that woman takes me up on the offer. She actually was very excited about. I thought she would be all about the Paul Lynch book. Oh shoot. Which I would do. Right. So anyway, the Paul Lynch book, I'm sorry, it was on the list. Like, you have to read this book. Like, it is the single most important book I've read in the last 5 years. Like,
wow.
It speaks so directly to what we're doing. It is incredibly tragic. And if it does not trigger your powers of empathy, like, you may not be human. I don't know. You might have no soul.
Awesome.
Because
get it on a shelf talker so we can stick it on the
just demands that you consider these personal horrors that we are so eager to not look at. Like, it's like you can't look away, And so I was trying to say, you should really read this. Like, you seem like this erudite person. And she was like, oh, I really like that. I think I'm going to come back next time. But actually, I'm here for some hand cream. And she bought the hand cream. So.
I'm glad she bought the hand cream. That's excellent. I do find, telling people it's a tragic book, like a lot of people just immediately are like, ooh, no thanks. But
well, I mean, I get that because there's plenty of tragedy on the TV and your social media feeds and all that jazz. But it just contextualizes that tragedy, and it just asks us how we allow these things to happen. And, it's so well executed. Like, it's incredibly well executed. I'm really impressed by this person.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Go.
All right.
Everyone
anyway,
read Prophet Song.
Yeah.
We've talked too long. We should get off.
That's true. This one did spiral out of control a little bit. But thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully the agenda at the beginning helped you remain all the way here to the end. And we will see you next time.
See you next time.